so good to have you on the podcast, Charli.
Thank you.
You are a CEO, and you've been a CEO from the age of 23 of Oaktree. Tell me what inspired you to take on a CEO role at an age of 23?
Well, I think how do I answer this one? When I first interacted with Oaktree, it was when I was, I think, about 18 years old, and I saw a job become available when I was trying to leave my previous workplace with the government. And I was just so inspired by the mission. I was studying international development at the time, and I really wanted a role in international development. But I didn't quite have the skills to back it up at that point. So I wasn't successful going the whole way through with that job. But I did get to know the CEO at the time of Oaktree, who was also, I think she was 23 when she started in her role as well. And we had a big long chat, and I basically stalked her over the years, and I kept up my following with Oaktree over the years as well. And then when the role did eventually become available, and it was 3 years later, I had a lot more experience under my belt. I knew that was where I wanted to be. For at least the past 4 years of my work life, I was desperate to work at an organisation that was really youth focused and had that international development space in it as well. But it was such a specific company, and I'm just so glad that it became full circle for me and I was successful in getting the job.
That is fantastic. So it's not the role itself that you were seeking, it was the work that you were wanting to be part of. It was the organisation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's really interesting, because leadership is such an interesting space. And you've had this wealth of experience in the background, which has probably prepared you more than many people for a role in leadership, because you have worked in a federal electorate office of a former prime minister. And that's not an easy gig.
No.
Do you want to talk a bit about that gig?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Well, What do you want to know?
Well, I don't think people understand what you do. I don't think people understand the advocacy work that you do in that space.
So there's electorate offices all over the country, and
Yes.
when you think about when you go to elect someone in government, you are electing a local person to represent you for whatever party it is. And for that representative, they have an office maybe of 4 to 6 people. If it's a big office, a big area, they might have a few more people. But we're all electorate officers in that office space. And basically, the role there is to look after everyone in the constituency with relation to federal government matters. So that means helping people with immigration. That means helping people with Centrelink. There's a lot of different things that go under that. A lot of the time we were helping people with NDIS cases. So we would have to advocate to the NDIS on behalf of the person who was having troubles. Maybe their plan wasn't sufficient for what their needs were. And so there's actually an option for people who are struggling with federal government departments to call their local representative and have them help them. And so that's what our role was. We were basically the conduit between an individual, a constituent, and the government department. So the majority of our work was advocacy internally to government departments.
Yeah. And that in itself is extraordinary, because you're dealing with constituents who are unhappy and demanding and potentially rude and all of those things. And so when did you start? How old were you when you started there?
I think I might have been 16 when I started. I volunteered for a little bit, I think for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then a role became available.
Yeah.
And I was just coming out of high school, basically. And I was an early graduate of high school. And I was just looking for a job, and I went, I guess I could do it. And I started off very junior, basically just doing office admin, not handling any of the constituent inquiries or complaints or anything like that. But then eventually over time, I was promoted and did actually have that opportunity. And it happens quite quickly when you're that young in those spaces as well. I only had, I think, about maybe 6 to 12 months that were mostly office admin. And then I very quickly moved up into one of the more senior positions of handling all of those inquiries. And then during that time, the person I was working for became the Prime Minister. And that changed everything. The office just got so much more busy. And then COVID happened. And it was very, very difficult. It became a job that I think would burn out absolutely anyone. Phone number was listed as the Prime Minister's phone number, not his Canberra office. So everyone was calling us about everything to do with COVID, which was really difficult. And a lot of people were in very bad positions. And so their anger towards us was justified anger, but not necessarily towards an individual. So it's always hard to juggle that when, you know, you're in a position that many would deem a position of power, but you're actually not. You're not that powerful. I spent, 100% of my time there trying to help people. But when people's, tensions rise and something like a global pandemic happens, unfortunately, the aggression does get taken out on frontline staff. And I didn't have a break at all over COVID. So everyone talked about, getting their time off and, the COVID was so good. I just, got to play video games all the time. I was working every day and we were answering phone calls, I would say 50 to 60% of them highly abusive for, over a year. And then that's when I decided I needed to actually leave. It timed up well with me finishing uni and I thought, on to bigger and better things, a break from public service and a break from phones. I still hate answering my phone now, actually. And I recently got a different job. This was last year. And part of that job, I had to ring donors. It was a fundraising role. And I very quickly realized how unsuited I was for the position because I still just cannot handle talking to people. I get so unnecessarily flustered on the phone now. So definitely I'm going to stay away from any type of telemarketing or phone-related roles, I think, for the rest of my life.
It's good to know. It's good to know those boundaries. So you're now working in Oak Tree and it is a youth organisation and you're the CEO of this organisation. And you have had this wealth of, seriously, the experience you would have had in that electorate office is something most people don't. That's sort of a steep learning curve. I'm just curious, how did the electorate office prepare you for what you do now in that leadership space, do you think?
That's a great question. I think I will never experience the level of tension and aggression and conflict anywhere else in my life. So I think it really, really set me up for success in terms of any stress that I've had since in a workplace, if I haven't done something on a deadline or if something's come up that's interfered with the piece of work that I've done. I was made redundant in 2023 for a role that I was doing. And the way that I was able to handle the issues and the conflicts that come up has definitely been directly because of how I was able to handle conflict and was taught to basically talk really angry and upset people down, has kind of flowed on to talking myself down from stressful situations and just taking things not personally, because so much anger in the world it's never really personal. Even when you think about the majority of bullies in primary school and high school, I had a few. You know that, being a bit older now, you know that it's not personal. It's because something's going on in their life. So I've tried to keep that in all aspects of my work and workplaces since then, knowing that people's agitation or people's aggression It's not my fault. It's whatever is going on with them personally, and I try to have very strict boundaries with my workplaces now where, it's 5 p.m. I'm
Yes.
offline. The computer's shut. I am not going to do anything. Some days if I really need to work after hours, fine, but I will 100% take the exact hours in time in lieu. I'm very, very strict with my work-life balance now, which I think has also bled across into the way that I manage people now. I trust people. I trust my colleagues to get their hours done. I'm not going to sit over them and wonder where they are in every second of every day or micromanage. People are very skilled in their own right. And for the most part, I think 99% of people in their nature are good. And, I think micromanaging is very much a thing of the past and should no longer have a place in workplaces.
Here. I couldn't agree more. I think micromanagement is about the fear of the leader, not the performance or competency of the team member. Again, it tells you a lot about what's going on for the leader when they're micromanaging about their fears. So you work in an organisation where you have a board and the board members are a bit older than you, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's about 70% of our board can be over the age of 30.
Okay.
30% of the board is under the age of 30. So that includes myself. So there's a couple of us who are under the age of 30, but for the most part, the rest of them are over 30.
And does that create any challenges for you?
I think it does. I think there is a unspoken tension that resides in age, but I'm very lucky to have a board who is very on board with change and with listening, and the voices of the young people in the room are always very heard in the board meetings that we have, and we're lucky enough to have people in there who are very much tuned into conflict resolution. Nothing's off the table when it comes to discussions, and it's a very safe space. I think that's not the case in probably a lot of other boards. If they, maybe recruit one young person, and the rest of the board is older, I would think that there would be way more tension in that scenario, because that can come across as very tokenistic. You include one young person's voice doesn't mean that they're all getting heard. But I think the way that it comes up for me is just that difference of opinion. There's always new ideas that are coming out, and even me with some of the volunteers at Oak Tree and my junior staff, I'm not as switched into what they are. And even if the age gap is just 2 years, there is definitely there's such a fast pace in which we're evolving now and in which things are changing that it's become really hard to stay in tune with what people are thinking. So I think it's just really important to always keep an open mind and to continuously try and learn. And I'm very lucky at Oak Tree. One of our core values is continuous learning and on-learning. So nothing's off the table at all. So when ideas come up, or if there's an issue or someone wants to run a new project, those ideas can be put out there and can be discussed really, really freely. And we're constantly interrogating, why are we here? Are we the right person to be doing this work? In what way should we evolve our practices? And so I think I'm very lucky to be where I am. I don't think there's many other workplaces who really uphold youth-led leadership as much as Oak Tree does. And there's no other place, as far as I'm aware, in Australia that can say that consistently they have recruited CEOs and staff and volunteers. The entire organisation is under the age of 27.
Yeah.
And we have a strong history of that, which is just, it's so incredible that I'm able to do that.
It sounds like because it has a youth focus and it's open to hearing ideas, that it would probably be quite a dynamic workplace, very different to workplaces which don't have that sort of yes and thinking. So that's an extraordinary opportunity to be in a space which doesn't shut down the voice because you're young and what would you know? Like, it's
Yeah, exactly.
that yes and thinking that's so powerful. Yeah. So do you have robust discussions?
Yeah, no, all the time. We meet very regularly, the board and and as CEO, I also sit on the board. So I think that extra responsibility has opened my eyes to how organizations are governed and how it's so different from just a normal leadership role. There's no one else higher than the board when it comes to an organization. That's it. So it's very interesting to see how accountable we have to hold ourselves. And it's challenging. It's very challenging because we're all trying to hold each other accountable as well, whilst also making sure that we have, the best, most cohesive organization as we can with only 2 staff members and a small team of volunteers.
Yes.
And all the board are volunteers as well, which I think a lot of people forget about with a lot
Yes.
of charities. And even, I don't know, in your experience, is there many paid boards? I don't think so.
Not in that, not necessarily in that not-for-profit space. Yeah. And that creates its own challenges when you're managing a lot of volunteers because they've got their focus in other places. So come and play over here. Don't. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard work. I've sat on. I've led organisations with a board, a voluntary board. It's hard work. Yeah. Fantastic. So how did you learn to be a leader? Like what do you call on? Because every leader's learned it from somewhere. Like how do we know what to do?
I don't know. I think it's probably just an wow, I can't even say that word, so I'm just going to start again. I think it's probably just an addition of my life experience together with, my upbringing and my family. And I'm very lucky my parents own and run their own business. And so my whole life has been seeing them run a business from home. And they have a very large company now that has grown and grown and grown over the years, and having direct exposure to that as a child all the way through to, uni and then moving out as an adult has been just incredible, seeing how they manage that and how they manage conflict. And their job has so many quick changes that happen and they have to just constantly adapt. So I definitely think that has been modeled to me as a behavior to be quite adaptive from a very young age. And then I think, just my experience over the last, 10 years of my work life being quite diverse. I've worked in government now. I've worked at a animal welfare organization. I've worked in early childhood education, and now I'm in international development. I think having an exposure to a lot of different ideas and a lot of different people really allows you to be quite an empathetic leader. And I do think there's a certain point where the word, leadership shouldn't even be used in those settings, because we're trying our very hard in Oaktree to be as equal to each other as possible. We really want to tear down power imbalances because that's a huge part of our work in decolonizing international development. And so we really try constantly to make sure that everyone does feel equal and that their voices are heard. And I try very hard to be a leader who is approachable and very, very honest. I think being exposed to a couple of different really negative leaders over my time in the workforce, and leaders who don't necessarily tell you the truth or keep things hidden, it's never nice. It's never nice, and everyone knows as well. In the organization that I was in, where I was made redundant, our whole team knew that it was coming, but it wasn't communicated to us from the get-go, and it was quite uncomfortable. We had to run through like a team exercise that basically said it was a pre-mortem. Have you ever done a pre-mortem?
No. I have
It
heard about this though recently.
yeah.
Yes.
It was basically, if the company's going under, what would kill us?
Yeah.
And in this meeting, it was basically from the get-go put out there that the project that my team was directly leading and involving was the thing that wasn't working for the company. And it was so uncomfortable. And we all knew that it was coming. And then, of course, a couple months later, your program doesn't exist, you're redundant. And I think I really learned a lot from that, though, because I think you model your behavior off of, unfortunately, negative experiences. You go, I don't want to be like that. So I think I'm very lucky to have had so much exposure to the workforce at such a young age. As much as I am very burnt out as a person now from working, full-time jobs since I was 16, it has given me such a wealth of knowledge and experience that I
You
can't
couldn't
replace.
buy that type of experience. The experience that you had is really quite profound. And I think when we do have negative experiences, they are such great teachers. And of course, you don't want people to have negative experiences. You want to also be able to bottle, like, I do not want to put people through that, so I will not do that. I mean, they're great teachers. So long as we're not too harmed by the process. I mean, you don't want to go out, can I find a really bad experience, please? But when they come along, there's so much wisdom and gold that comes out of the learning from being in that space. It's extraordinary. So has
Yeah.
your leadership style, do you think, changed? Do you feel like you changed the way you do things now?
I think so. I mean, this is my first exposure to a role with as much leadership as this. I've been a program manager in a previous job, but this is the first role where I've really been quite a senior leader. But I think even from the start of my time at Oak Tree, I have definitely seen myself evolve over the last year. I'm nearly at my year anniversary. I think it's honestly been a learning process of trusting myself and knowing, there's no one really overseeing my work. So I have to hold myself so accountable to what I'm delivering. No one's checking in with me really on how many hours I'm doing or the work I need to get done. But the organization needs it. And so I need to get the work done. But I think that really flows into how I've been approaching the volunteers as well. We historically at Oak Tree have had such a large volunteer base, 100 to 200 volunteers at any given time volunteering with the organization. And one thing that I identified when I stepped on was that was no longer feasible. We have a much smaller volunteer base at the moment, only of about 10 or 20 volunteers at any given time. And I'm really trying to make them feel like the experience that they're getting is as valuable as what we are getting out of them at Oak Tree. And I think that power imbalance was a bit skewed previously. There's more benefit to an organization that has a lot of volunteers, doing all the outputs for them than there is for the volunteer. So my focus going forwards has really been to make sure that the volunteer experience at Oak Tree is one that is really positive. They're actually getting really meaningful training out of it and exposure to international development and to a lot of complex things that they wouldn't have access to otherwise at other workplaces. And understanding that at the end of the day, they are volunteers. And if the work doesn't get done, then I can't get angry. I can't be disappointed. This person is giving up their time freely, and whatever they can provide is sufficient. And as an organization, we need to make sure that we can operate without any volunteers. If they all were to leave tomorrow, then we need to know that we can still function as an organization without that. And so I think that has really been how my thinking and my leadership has evolved recently, is really recognizing that everyone's got their own stuff on, and just because this is the most important thing in my life right now doesn't mean it's the most important thing in everyone else's. And as a CEO and as a senior leader, I think that sometimes gets in the way. Because, as the leader, you want to think that everyone is as passionate as you are, as invested, but at the end of the day, I'm getting paid I'm in the CEO position. It's my organization. It's not theirs.
Yeah.
So really just making sure that every contribution is really highly valued, and no small contribution is too small.
No, fantastic. So one more question before we wrap this up. What do you wish that people understood more or better about young CEOs, young leadership?
Just that we exist and we can do the job, I think. It's such a complicated opinion, I think, that people hold, that young people are not as experienced or are not as valuable, because it seems to me like so much value is placed in the amount of years that you're on this earth, even if for 10 years you did nothing, or if you just, sat in one job. I think there's been a real negative opinion around young people as well who hop between jobs and get different experiences. You might be a barista for 6 months, and then you might get an office job for a couple months, and then something else. And to me, I think that's more valuable in a person, knowing that you have a wealth of knowledge and experience over different sectors and different things than, someone who's done the same job their whole life. And I just think that, yeah, that's an opinion that really needs to change, that we need to know that young people, even without any experience, have ideas. And the burden of innovation is often placed on young people in societies anyway, because we have more energy. And usually the revolutionary ideas come from a young person who doesn't have years of weight and reality weighing them down. They can be more idealistic and can really look to the future, I think, more than older people can. Even my younger volunteers, they are more idealistic than I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so energizing, and it's so nice to feel that again, because I think we do get burnt out, and it's not just across, not-for-profits, it's all
Yeah.
around, cost of living crisis, everything that's happening, COVID. Everyone is so fatigued and tired. I think workplaces would actually be a lot better for it if they did recruit more young people into more senior positions, because that energy really can't be replicated in any other way than someone comes into a Zoom call with a big smile on their face and has a plan and ideas and, oh, let's do this, maybe we can do that, versus someone, hey guys, how are we doing? What's the output today? I just think it's so much more complicated than that as well. But in very simple terms, the energy that a young person brings cannot be replicated. And the ideas that young people are inexperienced are so outdated. I had a call with someone a couple months ago who, when they realized the age cap at Oaktree, and how young everyone is at Oaktree, they said to me, a 23-year-old at the time, I thought I thought people of your age didn't even know what they wanted to eat for breakfast. And I went, okay, well, I'm a CEO, you're not. We're in a partnership meeting. I don't think this is going to work out. Yeah, it's just the level of insult as well that happens to your face when you're a young person surrounded by older people is so interesting to me. And so it feels so, complex, I guess, is the only way I could describe it, that people feel like they're entitled to diminish you as a person just for being the youngest person in the room. And, I can't imagine how that also changes if you're a young person and a person of color, or a young person and multicultural, or not from English as your first language, So it's such a complicated space, I think.
It is a complicated space.
Yeah.
But
I don't
I think, yeah, I just think you've summed it up really well. And I think apart from we've always done it this way thinking, which we all know is not very helpful. But I think the other challenge in workplaces these days is that, yes, there's a lot of people that get promoted into leadership roles because they're very good at what they do and they've been there a number of years. And congratulations, now you get to manage 20 people or whatever. But I think that the world is changing, and we are looking at maybe we should be promoting leaders, not subject matter experts. And we should recognise technical skills in a different way. And it doesn't have to be that great technical skills equals leadership, because they are completely different skill sets. Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see, more government roles as well in the future. People who are ministers of this and ministers for that actually having backgrounds in the portfolio that they're holding. I just think it's so interesting how we value leaders in Australia, that it's not the value isn't placed where it should be, which is, as you say, we should be promoting leaders, not
leaders. We should be developing leaders. Anyway, thank you so much for this, Charli. You're an absolute inspiration and a joy as well to spend time with. That was an awesome conversation, and I wish you every success in your role as CEO of Oaktree, and I look forward to having further conversations with you down the track.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me.